I'm Camden Duznak. This is my persuasive speech, and here's my audience. One of the most controversial topics within college athletics is whether or not athletes should get paid. A lot of people think that paying athletes could terminate their eligibility with the NCAA as well as terminate their amateur status as an athlete. And while you dig deeper into that, you kind of understand that this may be the case, but paying athletes could be an avenue to increasing the amount of college athletes there are within the NCAA. So obviously there are two sides to this topic, yes and no, whether or not they should get paid. When you first think about it, the initial thought is no. Many college athletes do receive a certain type of scholarship that helps them pay for school just for participating in their respective sport. Horace Mitchell says he's the president of California State University at Bakersfield. He says there are students receiving access to a college education through their participation in sports, for which they earn scholarships to pay tuition, fees, room and board, and other allowable expenses. Collegiate sports is not a career or a profession. It is a student's vehicle to higher education degree. This is true in many aspects. Football has over 50 scholarships for their team, while other sports have what's called the head count sport. And if they're on the roster, that means they're getting a full ride scholarship. This doesn't include walk-ons, but if they're getting a scholarship, that means everything is paid for. So obviously, that aspect alone can be proven why college athletes shouldn't get paid. When you dig even more deeper, it's obvious that them getting paid could be a very big benefit. A lot of people think that athletics is just an extracurricular activity. When you look at it, it's actually a job. Many people spend 20 plus hours on the practice field with coaches, and they spend extra time getting in extra work, whether it's in the weight room or batting cages for baseball or football field. Could just be extra practice with the quarterback. Whatever it may be, it's a job. Kenneth J. Cooper, a newspaper journalist and editor from Harvard, states in his article that Robert McCormick, who was an attorney for the National Labor Relations Board under Jimmy Carter, stated, "There are more demands put on these young men than any employee at the university. These men are laboring under very strict and arduous conditions, so they really are laborers in terms of the physical demands on them, while they're also trying to go to school and being required to go to school." So obviously not only are these athletes spending a lot of time on the football field or on their respective playing field, but they're also trying to get an education. And if they do need extra cash flow, they have no time to get a job. It's just not possible with the way their schedules are built. Another very understated issue within this is how athletes eat. Their diet is very important because of how much they spend working out and breaking their body down to get better in their sports. Their diet is sometimes lax. Kelly Weber, an associate professor and director of graduate students at the University of Kentucky, says, "It is important for athletes to consume adequate nutrients for both short-term performance goals and long-term health. Many athletes have health issues after their careers are concluded because nutritional care on their bodies was not a priority during their athletic careers." She goes on to state that according to Quattromoni, there is a need for nutrition education for athletes because meal skipping, limited finances, and limited cooking skills are common issues for athletes. So a counter argument to this could be that athletes do have meal plans for a cafeteria or a specific dining hall at their university. But when you look at the food that they're being provided in those settings, it's not the correct nutrition and nutrients that they should be replenishing into their body. And if they don't eat there every meal, then they're either cooking by themselves or probably going to eat fast food because that's what college athletes do. They don't have money, so they eat fast food. So that's a very understated argument that should be further looked at when paying athletes as well. And then there's the big argument that these college athletes are on TV. A lot of people pay to go watch college football, the big one, and then there's also other sports that people spend money on tickets to go to the games, and then TV time. They get colleges get an extra amount of money to have that contract. Well, Mark Edelman, an associate professor of law at the Zicklin School of Business and Burridge College, says the college sports industry generates $11 billion in annual revenue. 50 colleges report annual revenues that exceed $50 million. Meanwhile, 5 colleges report annual revenues that exceeded $100 million. These revenues come from numerous sources, including ticket sales, sponsorship rights, and the sale of broadcast rights. I see when looking at this, like, why can athletes not get a small portion of that for the benefits they provide their school? Some schools sell jerseys with specific numbers on them. Even though they don't have a name on them, everybody knows who that number is associated to. Lastly, the scholarships, as mentioned before, not all sports have headcount sports. For example, baseball only has 11.75 scholarships for a 35-man roster. So even though they do have a certain amount of scholarships, not everybody is on full ride, if anybody. So they may get a certain amount of tuition paid for, or even just their room and board paid for. But all in all, not all their expenses are paid for. Dr. Alan Sack, a professor in the College of Business at the University of New Haven, says, at the very least, however, athletes who put fans in the seats and in front of the TV deserves a genuine opportunity to receive the education they were promised and a stipend to cover the full cost of their education. So overall, unfortunately, it's going to be very hard for the NCAA to pass a law that student athletes do get a stipend or pay. But when looking at these topics and these arguments, it may be a good idea to provide these athletes with extra money because they could very benefit from it in how they eat and how they train and how they just become better athletes. And my family is still here.